Welcome to the TheEMTSpot's Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Samuel Harrison, and with me today is Olivia Harper. We're going to take a deep dive into a question I bet a lot of you out there with pacemakers have thought about at least once.
Oh, definitely. I hear this one a lot in my practice.
Can you use a blood pressure monitor if you have a pacemaker?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Because on the one hand, you need to monitor your blood pressure,
Of course.
but on the other, pacemakers use electrical signals,
Right.
and so do most blood pressure monitors. So are they safe to use together? What do you think?
Well, the good news is using a blood pressure monitor with the pacemaker is generally safe.
Okay.
But like you said, there are some important things to keep in mind.
Okay, that's reassuring. I'm glad to hear it's not a complete no-go.
Right.
But like you said, there are some caveats, some nuances, so let's unpack those.
Sure.
First of all, what about those wrist blood pressure monitors?
Yes.
Are those okay to use with a pacemaker?
So those are the ones you actually want to steer clear of if you have a pacemaker.
Really?
Yeah. You see, the electrical signals from the monitor in your wrist can sometimes interfere with the pacemaker's signals. It's kind of like two radio stations trying to broadcast on the same frequency.
Hmm.
It can create a lot of static and make it hard for your pacemaker to do its job properly. So
Yeah.
you don't want that.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's best to avoid wrist monitors altogether if you have a pacemaker.
Yeah.
So then what kind of monitor should someone with a pacemaker use?
Well, upper arm monitors are the way to go.
Okay.
The cuff on an upper arm monitor is far enough away from your pacemaker that there's no risk of interference.
Gotcha.
Plus, they tend to be more accurate and often less expensive than wrist monitors.
Oh, there you go. More accurate and less expensive. So
Yeah.
upper arm monitors it is. But even with those,
Yeah.
I imagine placement is still super important,
Well,
right?
absolutely.
We don't want the cuff too close to the pacemaker.
No, you don't. The general rule of thumb is to keep the cuff at least 6 inches away from your pacemaker. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions for how to position the cuff. And of course, it's always best to check with your doctor. They can give you personalized advice based on your specific situation.
6 inches. Okay, I'm picturing people with rulers now, carefully measuring before every reading.
I know, right?
But seriously, getting that personalized advice, especially with something as vital as a pacemaker, I think that's probably the most important takeaway here. Now, another question I think a lot of people listening might have is, does having a pacemaker actually affect your blood pressure in the first place?
That's a really common question.
Yeah.
And a common misconception. You see, a pacemaker is primarily focused on keeping your heart beating at a steady rhythm. It's not really directly controlling your blood pressure.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Think of it like a conductor for an orchestra. The pacemaker is keeping the beat, making sure everything's in sync, but it doesn't determine how loud or soft the music is.
Okay, that's a helpful analogy. So it's not raising or lowering blood pressure directly.
No, it's more about maintaining a regular heartbeat.
Right.
But having said that, by ensuring that regular heartbeat, the pacemaker can actually contribute to more stable blood pressure readings overall.
Oh, okay.
Especially if you had issues with like an irregular heartbeat causing your blood pressure to fluctuate before you got the pacemaker. It's kind of like smoothing out the bumps in a road to make for a steadier ride.
Okay, so it's more about creating a stable environment, so to speak,
Yeah, exactly.
for healthy blood pressure rather than directly controlling the numbers. So it
Yeah.
kind of indirectly affects it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of numbers, though, what's considered normal blood pressure if you do have a pacemaker?
Right.
Are the guidelines any different?
Well, that's a great question, and the answer is actually pretty simple. The guidelines are the same for everyone, pacemaker or not. You generally want to aim for a reading below 180 millimeters of mercury.
Okay, so no special target just because you have a pacemaker.
No.
But, as you said earlier, it's always best to talk to your doctor.
Exactly.
They can take into account your overall health and medical history to determine what's healthy for you specifically.
Absolutely.
And what about this? Here's a practical question you might not have thought about. Which arm do you use to take your blood pressure if you have a pacemaker?
Oh, good question.
I never thought about it until just now, but it makes sense that it might matter. So which arm IS best?
Well, it's generally best to use the arm opposite your pacemaker implant.
Okay.
That helps minimize any chance of the blood pressure cuff interfering with the pacemaker.
Yeah.
You know, just give it a little breathing room.
Right, makes sense. But what if you have to use the same arm for whatever reason,
Sure.
maybe an injury or limited mobility on the other side. Is that a problem?
It's not necessarily a problem. It's still possible to get an accurate reading, but you just want to remember that 6-inch rule we talked about earlier.
Uh-huh.
Make sure the cuff is positioned at least 6 inches away from your pacemaker, and you should be good to go.
Okay, that 6-inch rule really is key, isn't it?
It is.
So just to recap here, upper arm monitors are the best choice for those with pacemakers. That 6-inch rule applies no matter which arm you use. And talking to your doctor, I think we can all agree, that's always a good idea to get that personalized advice. Any other important tips we should know about blood pressure monitors and pacemakers?
Well, I'd say if you're looking for specific monitor recommendations, the Oxalign Pressure X Pro, the CheckMe BP2, and the CardioArm are all excellent choices. They're known for their accuracy and user-friendly features.
Oh, good to know. I'm sure some people out there are jotting those down. Now let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's think about how having a pacemaker plays into the bigger picture of blood pressure management. It's not just about the readings themselves. Right.
You're absolutely right. It's about so much more than that. A pacemaker helps keep your heart rhythm steady, but it's not, a magic bullet.
Right.
You still need to be mindful of your overall health to keep your blood pressure in a healthy range.
So even with a pacemaker, lifestyle choices still really matter when it comes to blood pressure.
Oh, absolutely. Things like your diet, how much exercise you're getting, stress management, all those things play a big role. And that's where things get really interesting, actually, because having a pacemaker can sometimes change how your body reacts to those things.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Tell me more about how a pacemaker can affect those lifestyle factors.
Yeah.
Let's start with stress.
Sure?
I mean, we all know stress can make blood pressure go up.
Yeah.
But is it different for someone with a pacemaker?
Yeah, so when you're stressed, your body releases these hormones like adrenaline.
Right.
And those hormones, they make your heart beat faster, which can cause your blood vessels to constrict, and then that raises your blood pressure. Now, if you have a pacemaker, it's working hard to keep your heart rate steady, but those stress hormones are still having an effect on your blood vessels, so it's almost like a tug of war going on inside your body.
Wow, that's a really good way to put it. So even if your pacemaker is keeping your heart rate under control, those stress hormones can still be driving that blood pressure up.
Exactly. And that's why finding healthy ways to manage stress is so, so important, especially if you have a pacemaker.
So what are some effective ways to manage stress? I know you mentioned deep breathing exercises. What else?
Things like yoga, spending time in nature, maybe listening to calming music even.
Oh, yeah.
All of those things can help lower those stress hormones and keep your blood pressure in check.
Okay, so stress management, that's key. What about exercise? I know it's important for heart health, but are there any special considerations for people with pacemakers?
Well, exercise is still definitely recommended,
Okay, good.
but it's absolutely crucial to talk to your doctor first. They can help you figure out what types of exercise are safe and appropriate for you based on your individual condition and, even your pacemaker settings. Some people might need to avoid certain high-intensity activities, while others might be able to gradually work their way up to more challenging workouts. It really depends.
So it's not about avoiding exercise altogether.
No, not at all.
It's about working with your doctor to find a routine that fits your specific needs.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
That gets your heart pumping, but without putting too much strain on it.
Makes sense. Now, what about diet? Does having a pacemaker change the way someone should be eating to manage their blood pressure?
Well, the basic principles of a heart-healthy diet, those still apply.
Yeah.
But there are a few things to be extra mindful of.
Like what?
For example, limiting your salt intake. That's especially important for those with pacemakers.
Why is that? Why is salt such a big deal for people with pacemakers?
Well, too much salt can cause your body to retain water.
Right.
And that extra fluid puts additional strain on your heart, even with a pacemaker, helping to regulate your heartbeat.
Okay, so even though the pacemaker is keeping things ticking along, that extra strain from too much salt can still be problematic.
Exactly. And beyond just salt, it's also important to focus on eating a balanced diet.
Right.
One that's rich in things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean protein.
Okay, so all the good stuff.
Yeah, basically. Think of it as nourishing your body, like giving your pacemaker the best possible fuel to work with.
I like that. It's a partnership. Your lifestyle choice is working in tandem with the pacemaker, which is kind of working behind the scenes.
That's a great way to put it. Now, there's one more lifestyle factor that we often overlook, but it's incredibly important for everybody, really, and especially those with pacemakers, and that's sleep.
Ah, sleep.
Yeah.
Could I'll probably use a little more of that.
I know, right?
But what's the connection between sleep and a pacemaker?
So sleep is when your body gets that chance to repair and recharge.
Okay.
And that includes your heart.
Right.
During sleep, your heart rate and blood pressure naturally go down,
Right.
which gives your cardiovascular system a much-needed break.
So getting a good night's sleep is almost like giving your pacemaker some downtime, too.
Exactly. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep every night. If you have trouble sleeping, talk to your doctor about it. There could be other underlying health issues that need to be addressed.
Good advice. It sounds like all these lifestyle factors, managing stress, eating right, getting enough sleep, they all work together to really support healthy blood pressure, even if you have a pacemaker.
Absolutely. It's a holistic approach. You're taking care of your whole self, not just focusing on the device.
I like that. Now, let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about some more specific questions that people with pacemakers often have about their medications.
Okay, sure.
Are there certain medications that people with pacemakers should be careful about taking?
Ah,
Like even over-the-counter pain relievers or prescription medications?
right. It's always best to err on the side of caution
Yeah.
and talk to your doctor or pharmacist before starting any new medication, even over-the-counter ones.
So why is it especially important for someone with a pacemaker to check in with their doctor before starting a new medication?
Well, some medications, even some very common ones, can interfere with how your pacemaker works
Oh,
or affect your blood pressure in ways that might not be ideal when you have a pacemaker.
I see. So it's not necessarily that those medications are like completely off limits.
No,
It's more about making sure that they're safe to use in your specific situation.
exactly. It's all about being proactive and making sure everything is working together, in sync. Your doctor can help you weigh the risks and benefits and make sure you're taking the safest and most effective medications for your needs.
That's really helpful. I think a lot of people might assume that, oh, if it's over the counter, it must be safe.
Right.
But that's not always the case, especially for someone with a pacemaker.
Mm.
What about blood pressure medications specifically? Are there any special considerations there for people with pacemakers?
Yeah, again, it's just super important to work closely with your doctor to find the best course of treatment.
Okay.
Some blood pressure medications can affect your heart rate, and that's something that needs to be taken into account when you also have a pacemaker managing your heart rhythm.
So it's all about finding that balance, making sure any blood pressure medications you're taking are actually working in harmony with your pacemaker.
Exactly. It's a team effort. You, your doctor, and your pacemaker all working together.
I like that. Speaking of teamwork, let's talk about the importance of regular checkups with your cardiologist.
Absolutely, yes. Regular checkups are crucial. How often you need to see your cardiologist, that can vary depending on your individual needs, but it's generally recommended to see them at least once a year.
Okay.
And of course, if you have any concerns or notice any changes in your health, schedule an appointment sooner rather than later. Don't wait.
So checkups are important for everyone, but especially vital when you have a pacemaker. It's all about making sure it's functioning properly, right?
Yeah, exactly. Think of it as taking your pacemaker in for a tune-up.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Make sure everything is running smoothly. During those checkups, your doctor will monitor things like your pacemaker's battery life, maybe adjust the settings if needed, and just generally make sure everything is working as it should be. It's also a great opportunity for you to ask any questions you might have and, address any concerns.
I think those checkups probably provide a lot of peace of mind. You get to check in with your doctor and make sure everything is on track with your heart health. Now, you mentioned that pacemaker settings might need to be adjusted sometimes.
Yeah.
What does that actually entail, and how often does that typically happen?
So pacemaker settings, they can be adjusted to kind of optimize your heart's rhythm and function based on your needs and how your body is responding.
Okay.
This might involve changing things like the pacing rate, the electrical output of the device, or some other parameters. Adjustments aren't always necessary, but your doctor will assess this during those regular checkups we talked about and make any changes if needed.
So it's about fine-tuning the pacemaker
Yeah, exactly.
to make sure it's working in perfect harmony with your heart.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the practical side of things, what type of monitor to use, how to manage stress and diet, medication interactions. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that there's an emotional side to living with a pacemaker, too.
Oh, absolutely. Being diagnosed with a heart condition, needing a pacemaker, it's a lot to process. It
Right.
can be a big life change. It's normal to feel all sorts of emotions, maybe some anxiety, some fear, sadness, even anger.
Yeah, it's a big adjustment.
It is,
You have this device implanted in your chest.
right?
You're aware of it.
Yeah.
It's playing this vital role in your life.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to acknowledge those feelings. Don't just brush them aside. It's okay to not be okay sometimes.
So what are some ways people can cope with those emotions and adjust to life with a pacemaker?
I think talking to someone you trust can be incredibly helpful, maybe a friend, a family member, or even a therapist.
Yeah.
Joining a support group can also be really beneficial, whether it's in person or online.
Yeah.
It allows you to connect with other people who truly understand what you're going through.
Right, that sense of community, knowing you're not alone in this journey.
Exactly. And it's so important to remember that you're not defined by your pacemaker.
Mm.
It's a part of you, but it doesn't have to control your life. You can still live a full and active life.
It's about focusing on what you can do, not what you can't. Now, speaking of possibilities, let's talk about some of the exciting advancements in pacemaker technology.
Oh, yeah.
We've come a long way since those big, bulky first-generation pacemakers.
Oh, we have. It's amazing how far things have come. Pacemaker technology is constantly evolving, and there are some really incredible advancements on the horizon.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's got you excited?
Well, leadless pacemakers, for example, are becoming increasingly popular.
Leadless pacemakers, what are those?
Yeah, so traditional pacemakers, they require leads, which are basically wires that connect the device to your heart muscle. And those leads can sometimes cause complications or just be a bit uncomfortable.
Okay.
Leadless pacemakers, on the other hand, are these tiny devices that are implanted directly into the heart.
Oh, wow.
So you don't need those leads at all.
So it's less invasive.
Much less invasive to implant,
Okay.
which means there's a lower risk of complications during the procedure. They're also just more comfortable for patients.
Right, because you don't have those leads kind of poking around.
Exactly. And because they're directly in the heart, they can actually provide more precise pacing,
Oh, okay.
which can lead to better heart function overall.
It's like a win-win for both patients and doctors then.
Absolutely. And that's just one example of how pacemaker technology is advancing to really improve patient outcomes and quality of life. Another really exciting development is remote monitoring capabilities.
Remote monitoring, what does that mean?
So with remote monitoring, data from your pacemaker can be sent wirelessly to your doctor's office. So they can keep tabs on your heart rhythm and your pacemaker's function remotely without you needing to come in for constant checkups.
So it's like having your doctor kind of keep an eye on your heart 24/7.
Exactly. And this can be really helpful because it helps detect potential issues early on, allowing for more timely intervention
Right.
and potentially preventing complications.
That's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so new developments, smaller pacemakers, no leads. What about this? This is a more practical question. How long do pacemakers typically last?
Well, the lifespan of a pacemaker can vary.
Okay.
It depends on the type of device, your individual needs, and even how much your pacemaker is being used.
Okay, so there's no magic number, but can you give us like a ballpark estimate?
Yeah, on average, most pacemakers last somewhere between 5 and 15 years.
Okay.
But some of the newer models, they're designed to last even longer.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And when it does come time for a replacement, what can someone expect? Is it a similar procedure to the initial implantation?
Yeah, the procedure for replacing a pacemaker is very similar to the initial implantation,
Okay.
but it's usually less invasive.
Okay.
Your doctor will walk you through the process and answer any questions you have.
So you're not going in completely blind.
Ah,
Now, this might sound like a silly question, but I have to ask. Can a pacemaker be affected by things like electromagnetic interference?
that's not a silly question at all.
From everyday things like cell phones or microwaves?
Yeah, it's a good question. While pacemakers are designed to be pretty well shielded from most everyday electromagnetic fields, it's still a good idea to just take a few precautions.
Like what? What kind of precautions should people take?
So, for example, keep your cell phone at least 6 inches away from your pacemaker.
Okay.
Don't carry it in your chest pocket.
Yeah.
And while most household appliances are safe, just try to avoid standing directly in front of things like running microwaves or induction cooktops.
Okay, so just being a little bit more aware of your surroundings, using some common sense can go a long way.
Exactly. And if you ever have any concerns about electromagnetic interference, just talk to your doctor. They can give you more personalized advice.
Good advice. Now let's talk about something that's probably on a lot of people's minds. Heart attacks.
Okay.
Is there any connection between having a pacemaker and your risk of having a heart attack?
So pacemakers, they do a fantastic job of regulating your heart rhythm, but they don't actually prevent heart attacks.
Oh, okay. So you can still have a heart attack even if you have a pacemaker.
Yes, that's possible. You see, heart attacks are caused by blockages in the coronary arteries, which are the blood vessels that supply oxygen to your heart muscle.
Right.
A pacemaker doesn't address those underlying blockages.
Okay, so even with a pacemaker, it's still important to be aware of those signs and symptoms of a heart attack and seek immediate medical attention if you experience any of them.
Absolutely. Things like chest pain, shortness of breath, nausea, sweating, those are all red flags that should never be ignored.
Yeah.
Call 911 right away.
That's important advice.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that I think often causes some confusion.
Mhm.
The difference between a pacemaker and a defibrillator.
Yeah,
They both involve the heart rhythm, so what's the distinction?
good question. So both pacemakers and defibrillators are implanted devices
Right,
that help regulate heart rhythm,
right.
but they do so in different ways. A pacemaker delivers low-energy electrical impulses
Uh-huh.
to kind of keep the heart beating at a steady pace.
Okay.
It's like a gentle little nudge
Okay.
to keep things in sync.
Yeah.
A defibrillator, on the other hand, that delivers high-energy shocks
Oh, okay.
to restore a normal heart rhythm if you have a life-threatening arrhythmia. So it's more like an emergency intervention.
So the pacemaker is like the metronome,
Yes.
keeping a steady beat,
Yes.
and the defibrillator is like the jump start
Exactly.
when things go haywire.
Got it.
I like that. And some people actually have both, right? They do. Some people have both a pacemaker and a defibrillator implanted, depending on their individual needs and heart condition.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's get back to something we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
Exercise.
Okay.
I know it's generally recommended,
Yeah.
but are there any specific types of exercise that are better or worse for people with pacemakers?
Well, the best types of exercise for you, that will really depend on your overall health and your pacemaker settings. It's super important to talk to your doctor about this.
Okay, so no Zumba marathons without a doctor's... Okay.
Probably not a good idea. But seriously, many people with pacemakers can enjoy a wide range of activities.
Okay.
Your doctor might recommend starting with some low-impact exercises, things like walking, swimming, cycling.
Yeah.
Those are all great places to start.
Okay, so those are good starting points. What if you're used to more intense workouts? Can you still push yourself with a pacemaker?
It's possible. It just needs to be a gradual process.
Yeah.
You can't just jump back into your old routine without guidance from your doctor. They might suggest you gradually increase the intensity, maybe the duration of your workouts as your body adjusts. The key is to really listen to your body and stop if you experience any discomfort.
So again, it's about finding that balance, challenging yourself but not overdoing it. Now, here's another question that comes up a lot. Can people with pacemakers travel safely?
Absolutely. Traveling with a pacemaker is generally very safe. It shouldn't stop you from seeing the world. However, there are a few things to keep in mind.
Like what? Are there any special precautions people should take?
Yeah, before you travel, talk to your doctor about your itinerary
Okay.
and any potential risks. Make sure you have a copy of your pacemaker identification card, a list of your medications. It's also a good idea to do a little research and look up medical facilities in your destination, just in case.
Okay, that's good advice. What about airport security? Can pacemakers set off metal detectors?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
But don't worry, airport security personnel are usually trained to handle this. Just show your pacemaker identification card to the security officer. Explain that you have a pacemaker, and they'll guide you through the screening process.
So just being prepared and communicating clearly can really go a long way.
Yeah.
Anything else travelers with pacemakers should keep in mind?
Most airlines are really accommodating to passengers with pacemakers, so don't hesitate to contact the airline in advance if you have any concerns or if you require any special assistance.
Okay, good to know. So traveling with a pacemaker doesn't have to be a stressful experience. It's just about being prepared.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's circle back to something we touched on earlier. The emotional aspect of living with a pacemaker.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can't overlook.
Right, because it is a major adjustment, both physically and emotionally.
It is, you might be feeling a lot of different emotions. Relief that the pacemaker is there helping your heart, maybe some anxiety about potential complications or limitations. It's normal.
Yeah.
You might feel fear, anxiety, sadness, maybe even some anger. These are all valid reactions to a life-changing event like this.
So what advice do you have for those who are struggling to cope with those emotions?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
There are millions of people around the world living with pacemakers and leading full and fulfilling lives.
Right.
Talk to your doctor, talk to a therapist, maybe join a support group. All of those things can really help you process your feelings and develop healthy coping mechanisms.
It's all about finding that support system, right?
Actually, it helps to share experiences, gain some perspective, and realize that life with a pacemaker can still be full of joy and meaning.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that your identity is not defined by your pacemaker.
Right.
It's just one part of who you are.
Yeah, you can still pursue your passions, achieve your goals, and live a life you love.
That's a great message. It's about focusing on what you can do, not letting the pacemaker hold you back. Now, speaking of possibilities, let's talk about the future of pacemaker technology.
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorite things to talk about.
What's getting you excited? What's on the horizon?
Well, researchers are working on developing even smaller and more sophisticated pacemakers that can be implanted using even less invasive procedures.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a pacemaker the size of a grain of rice,
Right.
implanted with just a simple catheter.
Wow, that sounds like science fiction.
I know, right? But it's closer than you think. Scientists are also exploring new ways to power pacemakers, such as using energy harvested from the body's own movement.
Wow, so no more battery changes.
Exactly. A pacemaker that just charges itself as you move about your day. That's the kind of innovation we're talking about.
That is amazing. What else? What else is in the works?
And that's not all. They're also looking into ways to use pacemakers to treat other conditions, like heart failure and sleep apnea.
That's incredible. The future of pacemaker technology sounds very bright. Any other advancements that you're particularly excited about?
One area that I'm really interested in is the development of pacemakers that can actually communicate with other devices like smartphones and smartwatches.
So you could get real-time feedback on your heart health right there on your wrist.
Exactly. This could completely revolutionize how we monitor and manage heart conditions. Imagine a world where your pacemaker sends alerts to your doctor if it detects any irregularities,
Oh, wow.
allowing for early intervention and potentially preventing serious complications.
That's pretty amazing. So it sounds like we're moving towards a future where pacemakers are more than just devices that regulate heart rhythm.
Yes,
They're becoming more like sophisticated tools for personalized heart care.
precisely. It's a very exciting time to be involved in this field. Now, let's address a concern that's become more prevalent in recent years: cybersecurity.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Cybersecurity and pacemakers.
Yes.
With everything becoming so connected these days, it makes sense that that would be a concern for pacemakers too. Are they really at risk of being hacked?
So while the risk of pacemaker hacking is currently still quite low, it's not something we can completely ignore in this day and age.
That is a little unsettling. So what can people do to protect themselves?
I think the first step is just to have a conversation with your doctor.
Okay.
Talk about the cybersecurity features of your specific pacemaker. Ask about any potential risks. Make sure your pacemaker's software is always up to date. And be really cautious about connecting your pacemaker to any external devices or networks unless it's specifically recommended by your doctor.
So again, it's about awareness.
Yes.
Taking those proactive steps to protect yourself.
Okay.
Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, I just want to re-emphasize something that we've kind of touched on throughout this whole conversation,
Okay.
and that is the importance of a healthy lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely. Even with a pacemaker, those lifestyle choices play a huge role in managing your blood pressure and your overall heart health.
It's that holistic approach we were talking about,
Yeah.
looking at the big picture. But are there any specific lifestyle considerations for those with pacemakers that we haven't really covered yet?
Well, we talked about diet, exercise, stress management, all of which are super important. But let's maybe delve a little deeper into each of those areas. Talk about some specific strategies that might be helpful for those living with a pacemaker.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with diet. What are the most important dietary considerations for someone with a pacemaker?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, limiting your salt intake. That's key. Aim for no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day,
Okay.
or even less if your doctor recommends it.
That's a good reminder. It's easy to overdo it on the salt without even realizing it.
It is. So read those food labels carefully. Pay attention to the sodium content. When you're cooking at home, experiment with herbs and spices to flavor your food instead of relying on salt.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Now, beyond salt, what other dietary adjustments can people make to support their heart health and their blood pressure?
I'd say focus on eating a diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and lean protein. These foods provide essential nutrients and fiber, which can help to lower blood pressure and cholesterol levels.
So really, it's just that classic heart-healthy diet that we hear so much about. But it takes on even more importance when you have a pacemaker.
Exactly. And remember, small changes can make a big difference. Start by incorporating one or two healthy habits into your daily routine and gradually build from there.
Okay, so it's about finding what works for you and making it sustainable.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what about exercise?
Yeah.
We know it's important. What are some practical tips for people with pacemakers to kind of incorporate exercise safely and effectively into their routines?
I think the most important thing is to start slowly. Gradually increase the intensity and duration of your workouts as you feel comfortable.
Okay, so no jumping right into that marathon.
No, probably not a good idea. But seriously, listen to your body. Don't push yourself too hard, especially in the beginning.
Okay.
Walking is an excellent place to start. It's low impact, you can do it almost anywhere, and it doesn't require any fancy equipment.
One foot in front of the other.
Exactly. And as you get stronger, you can gradually increase the distance, speed, or incline of your walks. Swimming is another great option as it's very gentle on your joints.
We like that one.
Cycling is another great low-impact activity
Okay.
that you can adapt to your fitness level.
So there are really plenty of options to choose from, no matter your preferences or your fitness level.
Absolutely. The key is to find activities that you enjoy and make them a regular part of your routine.
I like that. Now let's move on to another really crucial aspect of heart health, and that's stress management.
Stress. The silent killer.
I know, right? We talked about how stress can really impact blood pressure, but what are some practical strategies for managing stress, especially for those with pacemakers?
Well, one of the simplest and most effective techniques is deep breathing exercises.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned those earlier. Do you have any tips for how to incorporate deep breathing into your day?
Sure, you can do it anytime, anywhere. Just find a comfortable seated or lying down position. Close your eyes and take a slow, deep breath in through your nose, filling your lungs completely. Hold your breath for a few seconds, and then slowly exhale through your mouth. Repeat this several times, focusing on the rhythm of your breath.
It sounds so simple, but it's so effective.
It really is. Another really helpful technique is progressive muscle relaxation.
What's that?
So it's a technique where you systematically tense and relax different muscle groups in your body. And this helps release physical tension and promote a sense of calm.
Oh, interesting.
Yoga and meditation, those are also excellent practices for reducing stress and promoting mindfulness.
Those are very popular these days.
Yeah, for good reason. They can have a profound impact on both your physical and mental well-being.
What if you're new to yoga or meditation?
You know, there are countless classes, apps, online resources available. You can easily find something that fits your needs and your level of experience.
Good to know. It sounds like there's so many different tools and techniques out there for people to use to manage their stress effectively.
Absolutely. And finding what works best for you is key. It might be a combination of different techniques. You might find one particular method that really resonates with you. It's all about finding your own personal stress-busting toolkit.
I like that. Okay, now let's talk about something that's often overlooked but is incredibly important for both physical and mental health, and that's sleep.
Yes, sleep is essential for everyone, but it's especially crucial for those with pacemakers.
We've touched on this a bit earlier, but can you kind of reiterate why sleep is so important for heart health and pacemaker function?
Yeah, so during sleep, your body gets a chance to repair and rejuvenate itself. And that includes your heart.
Right.
Your heart rate and blood pressure naturally decrease during sleep, which allows your cardiovascular system to recover from the day's activities.
So getting enough sleep is really like giving your pacemaker a break, allowing it to function optimally.
Exactly. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep each night. And if you're having trouble sleeping, talk to your doctor about it. There might be some underlying issues that need to be addressed, like sleep apnea or other sleep disorders.
What are some tips for improving your sleep quality?
You know, simple things like establishing a regular sleep schedule, creating a relaxing bedtime routine, and making sure your bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool can all help.
Those are all good tips. So prioritizing sleep is really just as important as managing your diet, your exercise, and your stress levels when it comes to your overall heart health and pacemaker function.
Couldn't agree more. It's all interconnected. Taking care of your whole self is the best way to support your heart and ensure that your pacemaker is working as effectively as possible.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, expert.
We have, from the ins and outs of blood pressure monitors to all the lifestyle things that can affect your heart health when you have a pacemaker. It really is a holistic picture, isn't it?
Absolutely. Managing blood pressure with a pacemaker, it's definitely not just one thing. You have to consider everything. Before we get to our final takeaways for everybody listening, is there anything else you want to add about this whole idea of a holistic approach?
Well, we've gone over a lot of information, but there really is no one size fits all, is there? I mean, everyone's situation is unique. What works for one person might not work for someone else.
That's so true, and it's a good reminder that everyone listening should keep that open communication with their doctor. That's key, because they can help you understand all of this information and really create a personalized plan that's best for you.
Absolutely. Working together, finding what works for you and your individual needs, that's what it's all about. Now, let's do a quick recap. Just hit the high points of what we talked about today. What are the big things for people with pacemakers to remember about monitoring their blood pressure?
Okay, great idea.
First things first, upper arm blood pressure monitors, those are the ones to use. Wrist monitors, no go.
Right, because those electrical signals can get mixed up like we were talking about, like a radio station mix-up.
Exactly. And whichever arm you're using, that cuff needs to be at least 6 inches away from the pacemaker.
That's right, that 6-inch rule. Don't forget it. It's like you're giving your pacemaker a little buffer zone.
And always, always follow the manufacturer's instructions on how to use your monitor.
Right, good point, because each monitor might be a little different.
Exactly. And don't forget to talk to your doctor about what your blood pressure readings mean. They can help you understand those numbers and make adjustments to your treatment plan as needed.
Right, so it's about working as a team, you, your doctor, everyone working together to keep your heart healthy.
Okay, so beyond those practical tips about the monitors themselves, what are some of the bigger takeaways about blood pressure and pacemakers? Well, I'd say the big one is that it's not just about the pacemaker doing its thing, it's about your lifestyle choices too.
Hmm.
Those play a huge role in keeping your blood pressure where it needs to be. Stress management, regular exercise, balanced diet, enough sleep, all those things we talked about, those are important for everybody, but they take on even more importance when you have a pacemaker.
Right, and finding what works for you and incorporating healthy habits into your daily life. It's not about being perfect. It's about gradual change, making those changes that you can actually stick with.
You got it. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
And remember, you are not alone on this journey. If you need help coping with the emotions of having a pacemaker, if you need help making those lifestyle changes, talk to your doctor, find a therapist, maybe join a support group. There's a whole community out there ready to help.
It can make a huge difference to know you're not alone.
And finally, I want to say this. Don't let your pacemaker define you. It doesn't have to control your life. You can still live a full and active life. Pursue your passions, reach for your goals. All those things are still possible.
That is such a great message to end on. It's about taking control, focusing on what you can do.
Exactly. Embrace life, take care of yourself, and keep that heart healthy.
I want to thank you, Olivia, so much for taking the time to join us and share all this amazing information today. It has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the world of blood pressure and pacemakers.
Thanks for having me, Samuel. It's always a pleasure to talk about this stuff and help people better understand how to take care of their heart health.
To everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us today on the TheEMTSpot's Blood Pressure Podcast. We hope you found this episode informative and empowering. I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show, like this episode, leave a comment, and share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. And be sure to join us next time for another deep dive into the world of blood pressure. Until then, take care and keep those hearts healthy.